Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and I'm really excited to have you here for another video. Now, before we move on to today's content, there's a few housekeeping items that we need to go over, so let's take a look at what some of those are. I have been getting messages from people all over the world about different opportunities. While I'm very excited to get your message about the opportunity, the best way you can get in contact with me is by clicking the link in the description. In the description below, you'll find a link for an opportunity discussion where you can book time on my calendar. When you click that link, it'll take you directly to my calendar. You'll have the most up-to-date information. You'll be able to put in your name, email, preferred method of contact, and a little short summary about what opportunity you have. After confirming and submitting, you'll receive a calendar invite where you and I can both talk. And during this time, you can go ahead and tell me all about your opportunity, and hopefully it's a good fit. So make sure you click the link in the description, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. With all the housekeeping items out of the way, let's get into today's content. Recently, I've been doing a lot of videos about Linux related topics, from why Linux is so popular, to what are the different distros and what is a distro, to even some of the spaces that you'll find Linux. Now, with a lot of the intro information about Linux out of the way, now's the time to jump in to learn about the operating system itself. And specifically, we're gonna learn about Red Hat. Now, in the next coming videos, there's a lot of things that are gonna be geared towards this operating system as far as learning it, working with it. In order for you to follow along and learn about the Linux operating system, specifically RHEL, which is what we're gonna cover, now we're gonna have to learn how to install it on our machine and work with it. Specifically, we're gonna be working with it in a virtualized environment. Now, without going too much into the weeds about what a virtualized environment is, basically in a nutshell, it allows you to run your host operating system, and that can be either Windows or it can be Mac. And then it allows you to virtualize a computer or have a guest operating system, which would be Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is what we're gonna target, have that run on top of your host operating system, which in this case, I'm gonna show you how to do it in a Windows environment. So let's jump into how do we set up Red Hat Enterprise Linux, because that's gonna be our operating system of choice. And we're gonna virtualize that so that way you can follow along in all the videos that are gonna be coming up, and you can make sure that you learn all about Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but more importantly, it's one step closer to getting your RHCSA certification. Welcome to my desktop, where we're going to learn how to install Red Hat Enterprise Linux on a virtual machine. And over here, you'll see that we have a web browser up. And of course, with the web browser up, we're going to head over to https://developers.redhat.com. And this is the website that you'll be presented once you go, as of the recording of this video, of course. And one of the things that we have to do in order to install Red Hat Enterprise Linux in a virtualized environment is we need to be able to get the operating system, or an ISO as it's called. And so in order to do that, one of the first things that we have to do is register for a Red Hat developer account. And as you can see here, if we scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll be presented with an option that says Join Red Hat Developer. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And once we're going to go ahead and click on that, you should be presented with this screen up here that you see. And in the screen, you're going to get an opportunity to sign up for a Red Hat account. And you're going to fill out all the necessary information as you see on the screen in order to get that Red Hat account. In our particular case, we have already registered for a Red Hat account. So we're just going to go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom, and we're going to click on where it says Back to Login Page. This is where we're going to enter our credentials in order to log into our Red Hat account. So after logging in to my Red Hat developer account, here we can go ahead and browse for the ISO of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We're going to click on the option that says Explore Products. We're then going to click on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We're then going to click on the option that says Download. And once we click on the option that says Download, we're going to be presented with all downloads. And you can see, based off of this recording, you can download Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9.1, 8.7, 9.0, 8.4, so on and so forth. There's many different versions that are available. But the one that we're interested for this instructional video is version 8.7. So what we're going to click on and what we're going to download is x86_64, and specifically the DVD ISO. And this ISO is 11.33 gigs in size. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off, and it's going to take a little bit to download based off of your internet connection. So we're going to give this about a couple minutes or so and see how long it's going to take. Again, it'll vary based on your internet connection at home. So hang on tight while we go ahead and download this. We just completed downloading the ISO for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.7. Our next step in the process is to bring up VirtualBox, which is going to be our virtualization software, and we're going to install Red Hat Enterprise Linux using VirtualBox. Now, if you don't know what VirtualBox is, or you don't have it on your machine, I'm going to leave a link in the description below for you where you can follow that and you can download and install VirtualBox and follow along. Or if you're interested in learning more information about VirtualBox, as this video won't cover in details VirtualBox. With VirtualBox up and running, our next step is to create a virtual machine and install Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And we do that by clicking New, and then we're going to name it. I'm going to give this a name of RHEL 8.7 VM, and you can choose whatever name you want, but this is the name that I'm going to choose in order to distinguish my virtual machine from all the other ones that I have up. And the machine folder and the type should automatically be configured and should be configured as Red Hat 64-bit, and type should be Linux, and the machine folder should be as default. So we're not going to change any of those options. And we're going to go ahead and click next. Next, we configure the memory amount that we want to give this virtual machine. And in my case, I'm going to give it 4096 or 4 gigabytes of RAM. Keep in mind, as you're configuring RAM, hard drive space, and all the other little goodies that we have to configure, keep in mind that you're going to need enough resources to run both the host operating system, which is Windows in our case, and also as well the guest operating system, which is going to be Red Hat Enterprise Linux. After configuring our RAM, which is 4096 megabytes, we're going to click on next, and we get to the hard drive section. We can leave this as default where it says create a virtual hard disk now and click on create. VDI is fine for VirtualBox disk image, click next. We're going to leave it on dynamically allocated, click next. And for the size, we're going to use 20 gigabytes, which should be enough to work with the operating system and learn Linux. Once you adjust the size to 20 gigabytes, let's go ahead and click create. The next thing we're going to do is adjust additional settings for the VM, and we're going to do that by right clicking our VM that we just created, and then we're going to go under settings, and under general we're going to go to the advanced tab. In the advanced tab, we're going to want to enable shared clipboard, and we're going to put that in the bidirectional state, and we're also going to enable drag and drop, and we're going to put that in bidirectional as well. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on system, then click on processor. Now we're going to increase the processor or the number of cores, and in our case we're going to use 4 CPU cores. Next, we're going to head over to display, and we're going to increase the video memory to 128 megabytes. Next option is acceleration, and we're going to make sure that enable 3D acceleration is checked. Now we're done with the display tab. Let's head over to storage, and under storage you have the controller IDE, and it's empty as you can see here, and this is the area where we're going to have to now install the ISO. So remember, the ISO is basically a DVD disk of the operating system, and this essentially is our virtual CD-ROM drive. So we're going to go ahead and click this little CD option here. Once we click the disk icon, we're going to go to the option that says choose a disk file, and remember, we're going to head over to our location of where you stored the RHEL 8.7 DVD disk, and in our case we had left it under the downloads directory. So here it is, and we're going to make sure that we double click it in order to mount it, and that concludes this section for the storage. Now there are a couple of other tabs here that are audio, network, serial, so on and so forth. We're going to leave those as default, and that should be enough to get us going to the next step. Now our next step is to start our virtual machine, and keep in mind that the virtual machine doesn't have any software installed in order to make it work. So it may look very tiny on your end, and of course we see it very small on my end as well. But after we're done installing it, we're going to install the necessary software in order to fix our display. So just keep that in mind before we get started. So now you should be presented with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.7 splash screen.
and we're going to choose the option that says install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.7. And it should bring us to the point where we can go ahead and install the operating system. So we're just going to give this a second or two for it to boot up into our installation screen. And here we are, we're at the Welcome to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.7, where we have to choose a language. So let's go ahead and choose English if you're in the United States. And of course, if you're outside of the United States or wherever you are in the world, make sure you choose your language. We're going to go ahead and click continue. And now we're in the installation summary screen. Under system, you'll find the installation destination, and we're going to click on that. And we're going to make sure that our hard drive that we created earlier of 20 gigabytes has a check mark. And here you can actually configure how you want the hard drive in order to be partitioned. But for our particular case, we're going to leave everything under automatic and let the operating system handle that for us. Next, we're going to head over to user settings, and we're going to set a root password. Go ahead and input a root password so you always have access to do any high privileged commands. And once you're done inputting the password, go ahead and hit done. Once you are done entering the root password, you can go ahead and click on begin installation, and that will automatically start to partition the hard drives, install the operating system, as well as all the packages that go along with it, and set up the user profiles such as root in order to be able to work with the operating system. So let's give this a couple of minutes for it to finish up and install. Now, a little bit of a side note here, and for those who are working with VirtualBox, while this is installing, I wanted to give you a tip on how you work with the mouse on the guest operating system and also as well the host operating system. So when you are using the host operating system, and in this particular case we have Windows, in order to be able to type in the guest operating system, which in this case is Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you have to click inside the window. Now, you may have noticed when you have been typing and clicking that the mouse seems to be stuck inside of the guest operating system, and you're wondering how you can get that out. In my particular case, on the bottom right hand corner, we see right control. The right control setting basically says that we've assigned this key in order to escape the guest operating system. So once my mouse is inside of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and I'm looking to work with Windows again, in order for me to escape, I have to click on the right control, and then that will give me my mouse back in order to work in the Windows environment. So just a little fun fact while we wait for this to finish installing. After Red Hat Enterprise Linux is done installing, you should get a complete sign as you see over here. And once it's complete, we're going to click on the reboot system option. Once the machine is done rebooting, you should come up to this initial setup option. In the initial setup, you're going to have to go ahead and accept the licensing agreement as you see me doing. Once you're done accepting the license agreement, go ahead and click on create user. And here's where you're going to actually create a user for the operating system. In my case, I'm just going to call this Lewis Test, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a username and password. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and click done. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and click on finish configuration, and I'm going to give the machine a second or two to come up to the splash screen. Now we can go ahead and log in with the username that I created from earlier, which is Lewis Test. And once we're logged in, we're presented with the home screen. And as you can see here, it's saying welcome. So we can go ahead and choose our language and click next. We can see here for typing, we're going to click on English. And for privacy, we're going to leave as same, and we're going to hit next. And finally, we're going to hit the option that says start using Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And there's a couple of things that we can see here already that we're going to have to fix. One of them being is that our system is not registered, so we can't download any updates. We're going to have to fix that. But before we can download any updates, our network card is not set up either. So we can't connect to the internet in order to download our packages. So let's keep that in mind. We got a couple things we're going to do, and I'll put them up on the screen for you to see. We're going to have to enable the network card. We're going to have to add the user that we're using, which is Lewis Test. In your case, it might be different, but we're going to have to add Lewis Test to the sudoers file. And the reason why we do that is because it's a safe way to adjust system settings, and you can track on who did what. You never really want to leave everything up to root because you never know who root can be. Once we add Lewis test to the sudoers file, we're going to go ahead and update the system, and we're going to look for packages in order to update our Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And one of the last things that we're going to do is we're going to go and install guest editions for VirtualBox. And guest edition is basically the drivers to make everything work as far as the bi-directional drag and drop that we enabled earlier. It will also enable the drivers for the bi-directional clipboard that we enabled as well. And one of the biggest things that we're going to use it for is fixing our display. And our display right now is very, very small, and that's because we don't have the drivers or the software to make that display work. So those are the things that we're going to tackle in that order, and we're going to get to the point where we can actually use the operating system from here. First task that we have to do in order to register the operating system and complete some of the other things that we have to do is we have to enable the network card. And the network card is enabled through the terminal. And how we get to the terminal is by clicking activities, and then you're going to be presented on the left hand side a couple of options. One of them looks like a life buoy, and then under the life buoy is the terminal, or it looks like a gray box. And so we're going to click on that and launch that. And then once we launch the terminal, this is where we can start putting in commands to interact with the operating system. And as you see here, it says my username, so Lewis_test. And it gives us the name of the machine, so it's at localhost. And as you can see here, it's waiting for my input, and the first command that we're going to give it is nmcli, and this command is used to show us what interfaces are up or down for our network cards. After typing in the command nmcli, you should see the interfaces that are connected with this machine or this virtual machine. And the one that we're most interested in is ENP0S3. And we can see here that it is disconnected. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make sure that that interface is connected when the computer boots up for the first time. In order to make sure that that interface comes up when the computer boots up, we are going to have to change some settings in the network configuration. And we're going to do that by adjusting a file. And I'm going to show you that file in a second. But one of the other things that's important to know is that when you are adjusting files, you're going to need a text editor in order to do that. Our text editor of choice, and one that I highly recommend learning, is going to be Vim. And in the description, I'm going to put a link to a Vim cheat sheet for those who are not familiar or don't really know Vim so well. You can use that cheat sheet to help you navigate and be able to make the adjustments as I'm going to make in a couple of minutes. So let's head over to the network file that we need to make some changes on in order to make sure that our network interface comes up when the computer boots up. Before we go and adjust any network configuration, because our user, and in this case Lewis test, this user can't do anything that requires super user privileges. In this case, we're going to use root in order to make the adjustment. First, let's clear our screen before switching to root, and we do that by typing clear. We switch to root by typing in su space root, and it should ask us for a password, and this is where you're going to input the password from when we first configured the system for your root account. And once you input the password correctly, you should see now that you are root. Once you see the pound sign, you now know that you are root. Now that we're root, we're going to actually adjust the file for that particular network interface that was disconnected, and we're going to make sure that it's connected when the computer boots up. And we're going to launch VI in order to make the changes to this interface. And the path is //network-sys-config/ifcfg-enp0s3. And remember, EMP0S3 was the name of my network interface, and we got that using the nmcli command. And now that we're in the file, we're going to use VI, which is the editor, in order to make our way to the bottom of the file where you see on boot equals no, and we're going to change on boot equals no to on boot equals yes. And so utilize the Vim cheat sheets in order to help you to make those adjustments if you're not familiar with using VI. So we're going to go ahead and make the adjustments, and we're going to save. And then once we end up saving our changes, we're going to go ahead and reboot the virtual machine. We reboot the virtual machine by typing in /sbin/reboot space now, give it an enter, and the VM will go ahead and reboot. And once the machine boots up again, you should now see the network icon that is shown on the top right hand corner of the screen, and it looks like 3 small boxes connected together. Our next step is to register RHEL, and we have to do that in order to be able to download packages. So again, let's launch a terminal by clicking activities. Once we click activities, then we click on the terminal icon. We're going to use the subscription manager command, and the subscription manager command is subscription-manager space register space dash username, and we're going to use the username that you used to register for your Red Hat account from earlier. So go ahead and type that next. Then after you type in your username, we're going to use dash password, and then you're going to type in your password after that. And again, this is all going to be in plain text, so keep that in mind. After you're done typing in your password, give it a space and do dash auto dash attach. You're going to be prompted with a box to enter your root password. So go ahead and type that in. And once you typed in your root password, it's going to reach out to Red Hat and try to register this operating system. And if successful, you should see a message like shown on the screen where it says the system has been registered with ID, and it gives you an ID. If you need help on the command that we just used, I'm going to put something in the description for you guys that you can reference in order to be able to make sure that you do this part correctly. Now on to our next task, which is to add our username to the list of sudoers. And in my particular case, I'm adding Louis_test to that list of sudoers files so we can do elevated privileges with that particular username. So one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to, of course, do this through the terminal. So make sure you launch your terminal. And in order to make this change, we are going to have to be root in order to do that. So let's go ahead and switch users to root. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to type in the command usermod-a capital G space wheel and username, which is going to be Louis_test. And once we complete that command, my username Louis_test will be added to the list of sudoers, and Louis_test can do elevated privileges command. And don't forget that you have to do a reboot in order to have the changes apply. So we're going to go ahead and reboot the machine now and see if the changes actually work. Now don't forget, if you actually need help with the command as well, I'll put something in the description in order for you to reference to see how you can add your username in the sudoers file. Now we're going to see if the changes that we did in order to add our username to the sudoers file actually works. And the next thing that we're going to do on the list is to update this operating system with the latest packages. And we do that by, again, launching a terminal. And remember, under activities, then the terminal icon. And once we have our terminal up, we're going to use the sudo command in order to elevate our privileges, and we're going to use sudo dnf update. And once you do sudo dnf update, it will actually show you a list of all the available packages in order for you to update. And remember, it's going to ask you whether you want to update the packages or not. So go ahead and give it a Y for yes or an N for no. But in our particular case, of course, we're going to look to upgrade it. So hit yes. And we're going to let the package manager update the packages for this operating system. Now that we have our system updated, and we can see that here by the complete sign, our next thing to do is install the additional packages that we need before we install our guest edition. And we do that by using the DNF command. So let's go ahead and elevate our privileges by typing in sudo. Then we do DNF. Then we say install. And we're going to go ahead and install the following packages: kernel-devel, make, gcc, and don't forget to give a -y at the end of the command in order to make sure that you're not hitting yes every single time it's asking you whether you want to install the packages or not. So let's give this a minute or two in order to install these final packages. Now the final step in the process is to add the guest edition software. And remember, that is the drivers in order to make our display work and a couple of other features work. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have to exit out of the guest operating system and go back into the host operating system. And if you recall from earlier, we're going to have to use the right control key. Now keep in mind yours may be different, but typically it's right control. And we're going to head over to devices. And once we head over to devices, you'll see an option to insert the guest edition. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And once we insert the guest edition, you're going to see an option that says whether you want to run the guest editions or not. So we are going to go ahead and click run. Once we click run, it's going to ask us to put in our password for our user. So we're going to go ahead and input our password. And now we just give this a minute as it starts to install our guest edition. Once it's done installing our guest editions, we're going to have to reboot the operating system. Once the operating system comes back up, go ahead and log in. Now you can go under view, and then you can go under full screen mode. And once you go under full screen mode, you can see that you're able to take advantage of your whole entire screen. Something that you weren't able to do before, given that you didn't have the guest editions installed. But with the updated guest editions, you can now see that you're able to take advantage of the whole entire screen. And as you can see here, from what we have shown, you're all set from here in order to use the operating system. You can watch our videos that are going to come out and follow along in order to be able to learn as much as possible using Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And if there's any questions or something that wasn't clear, go ahead and leave me a comment in the comment section and I'll be sure to get back to you.
So that'll do it for today's content. Hopefully you enjoyed, and more importantly, you learned something. I hope to see you back on the next video.